This is Counselcast, part of the Legal Talk Network, and I'm your host, Karen Conroy. When you face a complex case outside your expertise, you bring in a co-counsel for next-level results. When you want to engage, expand, and elevate your firm, you bring in a marketing co-counsel. In this podcast, I bring in marketing experts who each answer one big question to help your firm achieve more. Here's today's guest.
Hello, I'm Mitch Beinhaker. I'm a business and estates attorney in New Jersey. My office is located in Clark, New Jersey. So I live kind of in the center of the state, and I'm very excited to be here and talk to Karen on Counselcast.
Thank you for being here, Mitch. This is going to be, I think, a unique one because we are talking from the inside of a firm. So we've got the expertise coming from the inside of a law firm instead of a marketing expert coming from the outside and kind of telling you all these marketing theories and, why these things work and everything. Instead, it's, you are a practicing attorney. It's coming from your expertise and what you've actually kind of experienced. And so we're going to talk about firm management, business development, all of those good stuff. But the topic and the title of the show is how can a law firm grow with systems? So I know you've got a lot of experience in different firms and different kind of implementing these different kinds of systems. So first of all, why does this have anything to do with marketing?
Well, I mean, and I think that maybe a lot of the lawyers in my profession are a little guilty of this. I think that we don't think of ourselves as salespeople or as marketers. We're professionals and we're doing all of our legal work. And I think that, the automation and the process of doing that, you want your marketing to be ongoing. You want the firm and the attorneys and, your networking and all the marketing to go on at the same time. And I find that a lot of, especially little smaller firms, maybe the bigger firms have more of a machine in place, but I haven't found that they do it well either, but they do it. Is that you want to put these things in place because you get busy with work and then you drop off from your marketing and it's this cyclical roller coaster ride where, oh, now I got to find more business type of a thing. And nobody really wants to live that way. So if you have a system as to way you do your marketing, and I always say that the networking supports the marketing or vice versa, depending on where you are and what's going on. Yeah. You got to do both. But, so I have a lot of things in place that I've over the years learned and decided to do or figured out because I didn't want to have the stress of like, oh, I just met 12 people last night. Now what do I do with their names? And how do I get
exactly?
What do I do when a client matter's done? How do I get Google reviews? All that type of stuff. I don't want to be the attorney that says, you're right, Karen, I need to do that. Like,
right.
Do it. And I do that. If I tell you I'm going to connect you with somebody, I will connect you within hours or a day. I want it off my list. Yeah. And moved on to whatever I am producing the work that I have to produce,
Well, and I think that just kind of goes back to this big idea that your reputation is marketing. So if you are that person who's out networking and doing all this, putting all this time and effort and energy, I know for myself, like networking events and things like that, they zap all my energy. Like I used to be an extrovert. I'm not quite sure if I am anymore, but it has got to the point where it's like, okay, I really have to gear up for this and know that it's going to be a little extra caffeine on that day and all of that good stuff. But if I'm putting all of that energy into something like that, and then you don't have the system in place to follow up and make that, a full, end loop of that connection, then what is the point? And you're really kind of
you don't want to go to in the first place.
Exactly. And you're really damaging your reputation more than if you just weren't even there. Because if you're out there saying things and, kind of making a bad name for yourself, that's worse.
How many people, somebody comes to me and says, do you know somebody who does this? And I know I met this person somewhere and I can't put my finger on it because they didn't stay in touch. And I'm not the kind of person who, has my database with everybody's name and what they do. Some of them I do, but not everybody. So as a result of that, they should keep in touch with me. I mean, they're the ones who want the business, not me.
Yeah. Well, and I've had so many experiences recently, just not even in work, but in different things where it's like, I talked to somebody about this thing that I need. They thought I would need it then. And then like years later, it pops back up and they never followed up. And so forget about it. Oh, I know what it was. It was a cleaner for our house. They came by, sent someone out. We met with them and then they never followed up. And that was kind of part of my evaluation is, are you going to even call or email me after you?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. What's in place? So you mentioned that you have all these systems that you've kind of thought through ahead. What are some examples of that?
So I just preface this by saying, I'm a solo practitioner for the most part. I've been doing this 30 years. So I have a lot of colleagues that handle things. They send me business, all right? So everybody's pretty much virtual. I have a lot of per diem stuff. When I had a bigger firm, we were using, I think we started to use Clio. We had systems in place because we had to do, more formal billing and we needed a system to do that stuff. But even then, it was like pulling teeth to try to get the attorneys to do things from a technology standpoint then, not. So we would invest in these systems and half of them wouldn't get used. Now, if I invest in anything, I use it. So,
right.
I moved over to simple stuff like Google Workspace and things like that. But I have put some things in place. So when I got started and somebody comes on board, I get a lot of referrals from people who, maybe it's not the most complicated. Let's use the States, for example. It's not the most complicated situation. It's a young couple. They have a new baby.
Yeah.
They may not want to use LegalZoom, but they don't want to go out and spend $2,500 or $3,000 on wills, and they need to get it done. So I have technology that I've built into my website where they can go, they get a Google form, they prepay it. It's half the price, and in 3 or 4 days, they get wills with signing instructions, and they can get them signed themselves. They can have me sign them, but there's another fee for that. And I've done that and I'm adding commercial agreements and things like that as well.
Yeah.
I also saw a big problem when I was doing my website and the SEO and everything. I was like, well, I'm not really getting any Google reviews. What happens with a lawyer if you don't get Google reviews? Only the ones that are disgruntled clients, or very often they are people that you had to go after on behalf of your client that are writing bad reviews on your website, right?
Right, exactly.
So the only way to deal with that is to bury those with good reviews. So it took me a little while, but I have a friend of mine in Florida. She's a state's attorney too. She's very good with technology. She wants everything to be automated. So she gave me the template she was using. So I set up a letter. So every time there's a matter that's done, the matter comes off the CRM, drops onto another list. And I guess it's Zapier takes their email, brings it over to my system. I now use Aweber. I used to use MailChimp, but I use Aweber. They're a sponsor of my podcast. Love Aweber.
Yeah.
A little shameless plug.
Yeah, that's right.
And it drops in, and it drops onto a list, and they get an email letter telling them to please give us a review, give them some guidance so they don't violate any of my ethical issues.
Yeah.
And I started getting a lot of reviews, and as a result of that, getting a lot more incoming traffic from people that said, oh, I read your review, or I heard this from this person, or whatever. But I wasn't doing it because I'm too busy doing other things. So once I got it in place, it started to, really pick things up.
That's a perfect example of how you set up a system. You spent that extra time to set up that system, and you only have to set it up once.
Right.
But it drives the reviews, and the purpose of it is because then you rank higher. And at the end of the day, this is a marketing event. So even though it sounds like it might be some part of firm management or operational details, at the end of the day, the goal is a higher view of the audience so that they can find you, and it drives more business. I mean, that's marketing at the end of the day. So even though people think, oh, it's part of they may not think this conversation has anything to do with marketing. It absolutely does.
Yeah, of course. Well, because you're managing your client relationship. You're reminding them they probably appreciate what you did, and they're happy to give you a review. Yeah. And they get that. And because I've had people say, hey, can I review you? And they hadn't gotten the letter yet or whatever. I said, yeah, you'll be getting that soon. Yeah. But I think that, one of the things I did, and you mentioned before about going to networking events, because I'm a big networker. I go to events. I was at an event last night. I got another one at 4:30 today. Yeah. But it is exhausting. I mean, you do have to get yourself up. Sometimes I'm not in the mood, and I'm like, you know what? I'll get in the mood when I get there. I'll figure it out, right? Whatever. Right. Yeah. But you leave with a pile of business cards, and when I was much younger, I told you I've been doing this for 30 years, so 15, 20 years ago, what do I do with these cards? Like, I don't know. I call them, whatever. So using the marketing systems we have now, because it wasn't doable 20 years ago. Everybody gets added to the system, and they automatically get a 6-email drip campaign about the things that I do.
Nice.
Podcast, things that automatically. Took me a while to set up and write and so forth, but when it's done, on the list, they can opt out at any time. I always tell them that. I usually send them emails, nice meeting you. I took the Liberty card and I'm adding you to my mailing list. I hope that's okay. If not, you just totally opt out. No offense. And then you'll learn about my firm because we didn't have time to talk. I didn't want the pressure.
Right.
To explain to you everything I do at a loud cocktail event. Like, that's not what I'm there for.
Well, and a drip campaign lands differently. I mean, if you were going to try to explain the details in a drip campaign while you're standing in a cocktail party, it would not go over well. Like, that just is not, nobody wants to sit and read that. But by sending that information and then reminding and kind of staying top of mind, once again, absolutely elements of a marketing campaign.
Yeah.
And so from your side, what's involved in that? Do you manually go in and put each of their email addresses in Aweber or whatever system you're using, or do you have any other kind of way of getting the emails from the card into your system?
So if it's a networking event, obviously no, right? So I come back, I have a spreadsheet, I throw them into a spreadsheet, and then I upload the list. I don't do them one at a time. So if I come back with 30 cards, it gets a little bit involved. So that's a manual step that I don't think there's any way to avoid because people are giving you a business card.
Yeah.
But, and since we're getting into other automation, I do a lot of meetings on Zoom now. I don't have to see people in person so much. And I have e-sign and, the whole deal for retainer letters and whatever. Stripe, I don't know what they have me set up on to pay, electronic payments. And so Zoom is integrated with, I use Calendly for my calendar, which I discovered during the pandemic probably saves me 3 or 4 hours a week.
Oh, absolutely. And just frustration and irritation and like, what time zone is it? And I had one this morning and they sent like a list of, okay, I'm available at the following times, which is this in Pacific, this in Eastern. I'm like, no, it's not. You're adding an extra hour. Like, you're doing the math wrong.
I know. I talked to a guy in China the other day. He's an American. He's got a business. But Calendly took care of it. It was 1:30 in the morning for him, and it was the
day. Like, I don't want to do the math. Like, that doesn't make it doesn't make any sense.
Well, so what happened was I said there must be a way, since they're putting their email in and it's going on the calendar, there must be a way to take their email and to somehow get it into my CRM. So I figured that out with the Zap.
Yeah.
Took a while to test it. I had to talk to some people. There were some errors or whatever. And now that's what happens. They make an appointment. You refer me somebody. You say, Mitch, it's Karin. Here's my best friend, Sue, and she needs this and this and this. I send Sue a link. As soon as Sue signs up for a meeting with me, her email goes on my list.
Nice.
She starts getting the drip.
That's awesome. I use Calendly too, and I cannot say enough good things about it. It seems like they keep adding good features all the time. It really integrates with every kind of normal standard things that most people are using these days, calendars and Google stuff. And I do think going back to the business card, like there's no real current way to go from the physical card without, I do think that that's the next kind of
some people
frontier.
have digital business cards. I have one, I don't use it. And I guess there's a way to kind of pull it in and whatever.
There has to be a better way than just right now. What I've seen is it's either a QR code or something that you scan and then it just creates a contact. But then there has to be a different way of putting that in a folder somewhere or alerting you or having some other method of saying, okay, this was from this event and having a follow-up thing.
Well, if you can figure it out, I have this thing my son got me. He's a tech guy and just graduated, and he got me this thing called Dot. Have you heard of that?
No, what is it?
Okay, so Dot is, it can be stuck on the back of your phone, like this round dot.
Nice.
Or it comes in a card, because I have these things on, like, because I'm blind. So on the back of my phone, I have like little eyeglasses.
Oh,
so
nice.
It doesn't work. Like, I can't do wireless charging and everything. So let me see if I can find this thing. It is a card that's, So I don't know if you can see this, right? Can you see that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dot, okay? And it's got a QR code on the back.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So that would basically bring you to a digital business card, and you can then import that stuff. I don't know, though, if I imported yours. There's got to be a way to do it. I just got to figure it out. That's
the thing. That's the missing step right there, is to make it so that you have options to import it into different things that are then going to have a function attached to it.
Exactly.
But I do think that's it's not far away. I think we're getting close, because this idea of going to a networking event and having to collect a physical business card, it just seems like it's still from the era of Mad Men, and it's just not like, come on, people, we could do better than this.
I know. It's funny. I was, I'm probably going to insult somebody saying this, but I was at an event last night, just for fun. I'll say it anyway. So,
yeah, no, this is always good when you start that way.
Right, exactly. So I met this guy who I had met like years ago before the pandemic, and I remember his name, but I was kind of out of it last night. It was a lot of people. So he didn't have a name. Like everybody had a name tag on. I have one of those name tags, and I had made, but I didn't have it with me that night, so mine said Mitch, and he didn't have anything. So I said, "Why didn't you get a name tag?" He says, "There's name tags here." Like, I don't know. He wasn't paying attention. Yeah. So I go, "Well, do you have a business card?" "No, not really." So he tells me to pull him up on Google, his business, and screenshot the. Which I did, but what am I going to do with that? It's a photograph, So
this is probably how he does his Google search. Like,
maybe
what am I supposed to do with the screenshot? Like, am I going to save that and put it in a photo album somewhere? What is the point of that?
Even usable data or anything I could download. And I'm just like, whatever.
Well, you know what? That goes straight into, where I was going to actually back up for a moment, and where I feel like maybe we should have even started is a basic level of tech awareness and understanding, and you really need to educate yourself. Like, there are basics. I've been doing this for, it feels like forever, but going on 15, 16 years, and there was a long time, I feel like we're slowly getting past this, where people would even ask me, why do I need a website? And it's like, come on, why do you need a phone number? Come on, like, these are basic ideas I'm not going to talk about anymore. But there again, like, why do I need to know how to give people my name and phone number? Why are you even at this event?
Right.
There is a basic, the bar is pretty low. You have to have a business card when you show up to an event. You have to have a website. You have to have a phone number, and so at the very basic level, it's anyone's responsibility who's starting a business or a law firm to have these standards in place. And it's nobody else's job but yours to get this stuff figured out.
You have to learn this stuff. That's the way the world works. And
exactly.
And let me tell you something. Lawyers and law firms are notorious for having what I call these websites that are like billboards on highways that nobody's driving down. Like, there's no SEO.
Yeah.
They're just like, they think like, well, it's got all of our lawyers on there and all their information. Okay, great. If I want to find the lawyer, I can. But there's no incoming traffic. There's no marketing that goes with it. No optimization of any kind. No reviews. Yeah. And they probably spend a lot of money on it, too. If it's a bigger firm, they probably spend 15, 20 grand putting this thing together. It's beautiful. Nobody sees it.
Yeah, well, you're singing to the choir. There are standards that I believe that you need, even just with a website. And like you're saying, like if it's that kind of a website, it is a one-way street, and it's not putting the message out to your potential clients. It's kind of standing in this ivory tower saying, we are here, you find us. And that doesn't work anymore. No customer, no client, it doesn't matter what industry, who your clients are. That's not what anybody wants anymore.
Right.
So let's bring it back to systems and marketing, and how do we tie that all together in terms of where you kind of have to have your standards and understanding in terms of where your systems and, all of those pieces need to be set up and in place.
Yeah, I think that almost like writing a business plan, right? You have to write and create a strategic marketing plan, like the markets that you go after. What are the sources that bring you business as a lawyer? Because we all practice in different areas, who are our target people and then create a structure, like you said. Okay, well, I'm going to go out to networking events. I'm going to, market this way, that way. I'm going to make sure and then start figuring out how those can all, work together. The important parts are, meeting new people, getting their names, getting them on your list. I think one of the biggest deficiencies I find is that people don't have email lists. You would ask me, and I don't know when you're going to get into it, about my book, the book that I like the most. Yeah. I like a lot of books, but the one book I mentioned to you is all about keeping in touch with people, and it just blows my mind. People that don't see the value in creating an email marketing list of people that have worked with you, know you, met you, whatever. I ran, many people I ran into last night, they're like, oh, we met, whatever, and I don't remember. I mean, I meet a lot of people, and they're like, yeah, but I follow your podcast because I get your emails.
That's it.
Well, they're on my list.
That's
I met
it.
them somewhere, they're on my list. And it's just such an oversight
Exactly, because it only takes that little bit of setup. Like you
Yeah.
guys are smart people. You are lawyers. You can figure this out. It's the one initial setup. Sit down, sometimes it's like, if you're using Calendly and things like that, sometimes you're talking 10, 15 minutes at most.
Right.
And the potential for what that means long term is way more worth than that
Can't even
15
measure
minutes of your
it.
time.
You lost that you don't know about.
That's exactly.
And it takes time. It's like the podcast. I remember 8, 10 months. It took to that time where people started recognizing me and
Yep.
and it actually bringing me business because people would hear about me all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Well, you mentioned the book, so let's dig into that.
Yeah.
It is time for the book review. So tell me let's kind of do a nice smooth segue into that. What's the book and how does that relate to these systems and all this good stuff?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great stuff out there, but you wanted me to pick one that I particularly love.
Yeah.
About 20 years ago, I read a book called The Referral of a Lifetime. It's one of the Ken Blanchard, Gung Ho series that he co-authors with people.
Oh, no, I've never heard of these.
Oh, yeah. So there's all different. Gung Ho is one of them, but there's a bunch of books, and they're all parables. They're all stories.
Oh, nice.
Including this book is a story. It's a very easy read, 15 pages.
Oh, perfect.
This guy, Tim Templeton, authored it with this guy, Ken Blanchard. And it's all about building a keep in touch program for your business. But it's a story, I think, of a woman who is in maybe real estate, whatever. She was struggling. She goes in this coffee shop and she meets the guy behind the counter and I don't know, just like a bartender, right? She tells him what her woes are and whatever. And he's like,
Yeah.
"Listen, I want you to come here on Tuesday. I'm going to have somebody to meet with." And she goes through this experience of meeting with these different people that are doing these different things. And in those days, 20 years ago, we had to send like postcards to people. There was no automation, right? There was no email list. It didn't. So I started doing it. And then years later, I kind of fell off the horse because we didn't have those kind of systems and I was busy doing other things. And frankly, I lost, sight of what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And I get a call from a client once. I forget what it was. It was like the end of a year. And he said, "Listen, you've helped me with all those business problems. I need to put my estate together. Can you refer me to a good estate attorney?"
Oh, my gosh.
And I go, "You're kidding me, right?" And he goes, "No, my wife and I, we need to do our wills." I go, "I do that." He goes, "You do?" And that was my fault, though. It wasn't his fault.
Exactly. That is a wake-up call for you.
Yeah. So I pulled the book back out and got an updated copy, and that was all electronic. I started redoing the whole thing, building an email list, creating the drip campaign. It took a while.
Yeah.
But I said it's never gonna happen to me again. I'm never gonna be in a position where, or if they don't realize it's their fault, I still told them what I do on a regular basis. And the book is not only an easy read, but if you think people, they say in the book they use this statistic too. Everyone really knows about 250 people, right? If you filled a room with them, they would all know who you are.
Yeah.
If each of those people know 250 people, right? Just one level, that's like 62,000 plus people.
Right.
That you can reach. So why are you going and putting up messages and doing blind cold calls or whatever you're doing to try and meet new people when you have this treasure trove of people that can refer you business that is a little bit warmer than it was, before.
And they can speak specifically to, the work that they did with you or that they know of you. Yeah. So in terms of objections, I can practically hear it, like hear clients talking to me in my head. So how long? You said it took a while to set up that email list, but in my mind, like I'm having a whole conversation between myself and my client in my head. In my mind, a while is not super significant. I'm thinking less than a day, probably maybe, a day or two kind of to review. But how long did it take you to initially set up a good, solid, functioning email funnel campaign like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It definitely took more than a day, but it's probably because I didn't do it all at the same time.
Yeah, or hire someone to do it.
Yeah, right. But but you know what? That's hard to do because you got to look through your contacts, and only you can say, well, this person. So there's a process, right? You look through all of your contacts, and I would label them first like A, B, and C. C's are people that might know you but are never going to be a champion for your cause. B's may become A's, and A's are your they're singing your song.
Your
right?
evangelists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is a section of the book that talks about this. Okay, now what do you do if you have 200 or 300 people that you haven't been in touch with, and all of a sudden you're just going to start sending them stuff?
Right.
So it's almost an apology letter, right? You can say, "Listen, we've evaluated our relationships, and you're one of our most important relationships, and we have been remiss in keeping in touch and keeping you informed and so forth, and we promise that will never happen again."
Yes,
We're building
that's
an email
so
list,
good.
Yeah, it's really good. I forget exactly the way the letter's worded, but it's really good.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did that. So you got to sit down and you got to pull out your 200, or even if you start with 100, whatever.
Yeah.
First list, right?
It's better than zero.
Yeah, and you probably don't have all their emails. So, and then you start by building that list and then sending out we'll call it the apology letter.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's really important. And I was just going to pause on that really quick because it really comes off poorly if you just land in someone's email or inbox without any intro, and the likelihood of an unsubscribe goes through the roof. So you have to start out with that intro. And I will even say that this is messaging wise in terms of any kind of campaign we do, including websites. That's super important. So if you start out your website and you're like, bam, I went to Harvard and I do this kind of law, and you're not speaking to that client about their problems, forget it. Like they're going to do the equivalent of unsubscribe and go to the next website. Yeah. So if they're not feeling it and getting that message that comes from you that speaks to what you're trying to say in any format, forget about it. So that's super important. And like if anyone's thinking about doing an email campaign like this, make sure you spend an extra little bit of time on that first email to introduce yourself, do that sort of apology type thing, and get that warm introduction so that they're receptive to the rest of your messages.
Right, and I've had people say to me, "Oh, I can't do that. They're uncomfortable.
Why?
Like,
it's so stupid."
In 4 years.
Yeah,
that's the point of the letter. So when you run into them, they don't say, "Hey, I got your email. Why'd you send that to me?" You know, as opposed to they know why you sent it to them.
Yeah,
you made that effort, and that softened the blow. I think a lot. Definitely kept people from unsubscribing.
Yep.
And then from there, I would send out things on a regular basis. I would schedule them out because you can do that on any of the systems. And then eventually I ran into somebody who was doing that drip campaign, and I guess I was like, well, I would think that the system I'm using can do that. And sure enough, it did. And some of the stuff you discover by accident.
Yeah.
And I started building those emails, which took a while.
Yeah.
And you know, but you always got to be kind of one step ahead. Like I said to you before, I think before we were on camera, you should be spending like 80% of your time in marketing and business development, keeping in touch with clients and networking, and squeeze in the work, because then you'll never be short of work to do.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like that's kind of a reality check for people who are either starting or thinking of starting a firm. If that's not how you want to spend your time, then having a firm's not for you. Right. And I mean, to be kind of harsh and blunt about it, it requires, you're running a business. It requires marketing, and whatever kind of marketing that means, whether it's an email campaign, if you're super introverted, you don't want to do the networking, whatever that is, it requires that. And so, and I do think the other note I was going to add to your process is that you were describing how you had the 3 different buckets, the A, B, and C clients. Yeah. That would be a cool thing to add as you are. So if there is a future way of automating those business card intake systems, as you're adding those people into your list in the future, you should be segmenting those 3 groups. Yeah, exactly. So then you can have 3 different types of messages. You can make sure to drill down to that A group and, dig through there, see if people are responding, send them different messages. But it should be something where if you do separate them out, then that should be part of that intake process as well.
Network contact, or you might pick a specific industry because maybe you work with a lot of realtors, so you want all the real estate people to be separate.
Yeah,
things like that.
Absolutely.
All those systems allow you to do that. But you're right. I do know people that probably shouldn't be practicing law on their own. They should probably just go work for a firm. And they still have to do marketing. Look, the firm's going to push them to do some sort of business development, but at least they feel a little bit more safe. Exactly.
Yeah, and there's a cost for that safety, and so it's you got to kind of weigh those different benefits and costs.
Far in between you and me, the attorneys, and I'm 56, right? So I know a lot of attorneys. They've been working for firms for a long time. They get up in their 50s, and they get laid off or whatever, their department changes, and they have no business. They don't have a clientele because they haven't done that. So building a clientele and building business protects yourself, both your job maybe at that time, or at least your ability to go out and say, hey, world, I'm here.
Yeah.
And people still do business with you. It's just a really dangerous way to live, just to think you're good.
It is. And when you think about it, there's your value too. And so when you go out in the world and you're in your mid-50s, you've been laid off, you're starting from zero. Hopefully not. Hopefully you've take some of these other ideas. But if you lived in that safety and that fear of, doing all these business development things, there is a huge cost for that at that point. And so, it's not that much effort. It's just putting some time into thinking it through, thinking about, okay, like you said earlier, I'm going to this networking event. So if I get a handful of cards, what then? What happens next? So just thinking the next step ahead. Okay, so I've got this handful of cards. Who do I hand it to? I don't have anyone in my office, so I got to do something.
I got to do it, right?
Yeah,
do it.
Right.
And a lot of it is about, repetitiveness. Like, keep doing the things.
Yes.
Don't question them. Keep connecting with people. Keep staying in touch with people. Keep putting good content out there.
Yeah.
Keep getting reviews on your website. And I don't want to say it's magic, but it happens from time. You can get started right away, like you said, but it does take time.
Yeah.
People have to see your stuff. I don't know. What do they say now? 17, 18 times? Used to be 5
At
or
least.
6. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's so much more info out there. Yeah. Yeah. It takes so many more times. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And the consistency. And the other thing I say regularly, people have heard me say this before, is that I think one of the underrated aspects of marketing that people don't talk about that much is patience. And nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants the golden ticket.
Right.
But consistency and patience are two of the most underrated marketing strategies there are. So knowing that it's going to require patience, and what does that mean? Yeah. Does that mean you have to change your budget? Does that mean you might have to hire someone because over time you're going to run out of energy? What does that mean? And so, factoring the patience and consistency into your plan is really important.
Yeah, well, that's why automation is important, because you can't run the race yourself. You're going to drop off.
Right. You should also factor that it's going to be successful. So if it's successful, then you shouldn't have the time to do that in the future.
Right,
exactly.
That's the whole point.
Exactly. Okay. So Mitch, what's one thing that you know that works?
That's a broad question. You mean from an automation standpoint and marketing standpoint?
That's why I like to kind of end with that one, just in however you want to define that.
I know that consistency works. When I started the podcast, and I don't recommend podcasting for everybody, you got to want to do it, because it's just as hard as anything else. People I speak about it. I want to start a podcast. Do you really? After I explain it to them, they're like, no, maybe not.
Never mind.
And you and I know there's a lot of podcasts that put out 4, 5, 10 episodes and then they're gone, right?
Right. And that's not a good reputation, little ding on your reputation either.
No, absolutely. People find content. It's 5 years old. They're like, well, is this person even still practicing law? So
exactly.
When I got started, the one thing that was very important to me was, if I'm going to do this and enjoy doing it, I had to set up the podcast and do it a certain way that I could keep going, because consistency of putting out stuff on a regular basis is the magic formula. I hate to say magic, but it's the magic formula.
It is.
For getting results. And I did that very early on, because I saw that if I had to write content and speak every week, I would be out of words very soon. I was doing a 15-minute update on Thursday mornings during the pandemic, like a live update. Hey, it's the live Thursday morning update, whatever, right? The legal topics. I was after a couple of weeks, because I thought the pandemic would be over by May, right? Right? Yeah. I was getting stress on Wednesdays, going like, what the hell am I going to talk about tomorrow? So I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if I'm going to keep the podcast going, I got to do these interviews, and because then everyone else makes the content, and I don't have to kill myself. And now I've gotten to the point where I get so many guests through Podmatch and through Matchmaker and all these different things. I don't have those kind of pressures anymore. But if I have the pressure, it's not going to see it through. So
yeah, I heard a good thing a while ago about just kind of checking in with that, where you do feel that stress, and it's kind of woo-woo, but where you feel that stress. And I do this even if I'm having a sales call and I'm talking to someone, and all of a sudden I feel like tense and it doesn't feel good, I instantly know, okay, this is probably not a great match. Right. So I'm going to just talk to them about who might be a good match for them. Or if all of a sudden I feel like, I can just feel it instantly, like this is a great potential client. They totally get it. They're saying all the right things. But the same thing when it's certain tasks in your day-to-day. I mean, running a business, you got a bajillion tasks going on. And so like you were saying, you have this one task and you feel it coming up and it just starts to feel bad.
Right.
And so
and you know what
for
you're
me
going to do. You're going to put
exactly.
it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, that is an instant, if I either get rid of that task or I find somebody else to do it for me. So I bring someone on my team. You either have to get rid of it or you have to delegate or it's going to take over your life. And that's just no way to live.
Don't think because you don't have employees, you can't delegate. There are virtual assistants. There are
exactly
all kinds of ways to get systems to delegate things and make them go different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can't figure it out, then just get rid of it. I mean, you can't let that take over your life.
Right.
So I think that's a perfect place to kind of end the whole conversation where you've got all these systems, and these ideas and these things that you have to implement. But if you're not going to be consistent with it, it's going to do more damage in the long run. And you have to find a way to make that happen one way or the other, whether it's you, somebody in your team, or whatever it is that makes that happen, system, an automation.
I tell people, don't podcast because you think it's going to bring you business. Do what you like to do. If you like to write and blog. If you want to guest on podcasts, do that. If you want to speak, write books, whatever you like to do it because it'll be hard when you like it, let alone when you don't like it.
Exactly. Yeah. And not to mention, it's expensive if you do it well. So you got to kind of bootstrap it for a while before it starts to actually, roll back in your favor, hopefully, if that does happen. But it's going to take a while.
Yep.
So, set some funds aside for that.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Mitch Beinhaker is a business and estate attorney. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's going to be a really interesting and unique one. I think a lot of our listeners love to hear from a fellow attorney. And there's some kind of good lessons in terms of how to just set up your business and think about all of these systems in terms of a marketing strategy. I think it was a really useful and helpful conversation.
By the way,
thanks for being here.
The show notes or whatever, but I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn with people if they have any questions.
Oh, yes. We will connect. We'll have all your social media links on the show page and your links to your firm and all of that good stuff, your podcast as well.
Awesome.
So, definitely connect on LinkedIn.
All right. Thanks, Karen.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the CounselCast podcast. Be sure to visit our website at counsel-cast.com for the resources mentioned on the episode and to give us your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.